Hi, this is Ron Mertens at RonMartBlog.com, and I'm here today to talk about SilverFast 8 SE edition that comes with Epson Perfection v800/850 scanners. And what I'll do to begin with is need to do a pre-scan, and I need to actually choose the right type of scan. I'm going to do a transparency. Because I'm doing a transparency, it's actually going to show me the right thing here because I've already done this before. And then I'm going to choose that this is a positive because these are slides. I'm going to go from 48-bit scan to a 24-bit image, and then I need to frame these. So generally, let's go ahead and do let's actually get rid of this. Say delete all, do the pre-scan, and this is an optional step that I'm doing here just to kind of show how this works. And if you can see how it does a fairly quick pre-scan, and I'll pause for a second until it's done. If you watch, the thumbnail actually shows what it's doing and the pre-scan comes in. Now that it's completed the pre-scan, we need to find the slides. So the way we do that is we come up here to Find Frames. Fortunately, there's an option for 35mm holder, and it will quickly auto-detect where the frames are. Now that I've done that, I want to go ahead and make some changes now. Let's just, for the sake of argument here, clear out a little bit of this noise and have our basic settings. And oops, do that for the currently selected slide. So I've got my basic settings here, and you need to dial in what you want to do for this. There's a whole lot of features here. There's a workflow pilot that kind of helps you learn what those features are, but I prefer this advanced mode. And if I look at what it's telling me, it's going to do a 1.35 by 0.9 inch image at 300 ppi. Probably not very useful to me, not what I want. And I really like to use this thing here that shows me that it's going to do a 100% scan. And in my experimentations that I've done behind the scenes, I found that 3200 gives me the best balance of enlargement as well as preserving detail and doing a good job. After 3200, I don't care for it that much. And that's actually what this slider is trying to show you, is that you're getting into the upper limits of the scanner. It's going to start having quality degradation at this point, but 3200 actually does well. I found it to be still just a little bit better than 2400, but this might be a personal preference for people. And what this is telling me it's doing, and it's really important, it's doing a 1067% zoom. So that's a pretty significant zoom. It's going to create an image for me because I've chosen 300 ppi. That's 14.4 inches wide by 9.6 inches tall. And so that's a pretty decent sized print at a 1-to-1 pixel ratio. So it's creating a big file. It's telling me this file is going to be 39.9 megabytes. So it's going to be similar to what you might get from, let's say, a D810. It's a pretty big image. So, excuse me, not D810, a DSLR. And so from here, what I also want to do is pick some of my settings. Now, to get the best results, I need to zoom in. If I start doing things now, I'm applying it just to this little tiny thumbnail, and it really, there's not enough information. In fact, if I try to do this here, it's going to even tell me that your current preview is too small to achieve optimal results. You really should zoom in and to get the best results. Say, okay, it tries, but let's actually go ahead and zoom in. And again, you can see here what it's doing, and in this particular case, it's going to actually show us much higher resolution. It's going to apply those color corrections that it had previously done. And now with more data, we'll do the color correction again, and you noticed it shifted a little bit. It had more detail that it scanned, and so therefore it can look at more information and create a better result. I can adjust these to fit the slide a little bit better. And just as a heads up, this is, if I grab on these little points, it's going to move. So if I wanted to move it around, rotate it or whatever, I could do that. But if I wanted to size, I need to grab it by these other parts of the bar. So really keep that in mind. It's kind of one of the quirky things when you first get started that's easy to be confused or flustered about. Now that I've done that, I could just scan, but generally we want to add a little bit of sharpening, and we want to try to remove some of these dots and stuff. And so there's this infrared scratch and dust removal, excuse me. And so this, for things like slides, it does a really good job of doing it, looking at the infrared data from the scanner and coming up with essentially a mask for the image of what it thinks is noise, and removing that without really removing much detail. So this is definitely a better way to do it than going into Photoshop. But whatever it misses, that's when you want to go to Photoshop to try to fix those things up. This SRDX, that's better for when you're doing reflective. So you're scanning a print, then that'll do a much better job than ISRD. They don't have that same information available to you for reflective, so that's why there's both. And then I can come in along and say, do an auto adaptive contrast optimization, and you'll see that it made a little bit more washed out. I can say low effect. Takes a little while to do this one. Maximum effect. And again, the results will vary depending on the image. Now let's say I said, you know what, I don't really like what it's doing here. I wish I wouldn't have chose that. I can just click deactivate this tool. It goes away. No more problem. The other thing you'll notice is really obscure, this little teeny tiny dot. So if I remove ISRD, that dot goes away. I can turn it on. And this particular one won't let me turn it off. Some will let you click and turn it on and off, like me. Me is multiple exposure. I'm going to say no just because of our talking point right now, but normally I wouldn't do that. And so that turned it on, that turned it off. Now, an important thing to realize is that when we set all of our settings here, like especially if we're going to do sharpening or something like that, you'll notice that it says exact preview disabled. It's not showing me what that effect's going to do, it's just telling me that I've selected that option. In order to really show me what it's going to do, I have to do one of these high quality scans, which is really just as expensive as doing the final scan. So keep that in mind. And so sometimes what you want to do is just come in here, make all the settings changes that you want. And once you have everything set the way you want it, you've done your either auto CCR, or you can choose, like if I wanted to do landscape, it's going to be like a picture style for the camera, try to maximize the image for landscape. I tend to like auto CCR because it tries to be as faithful as it can to the actual image results. And there's other things like global color correction and selective color correction, and these are all fine, but you can also just get rid of them if you decide that they're not something that you want to have. Once you have everything dialed in the way that you want it, then for the best possible results and to actually see what you're doing, you can do this high quality scan. Now this is painful because again, it's doing the full on final scan, and then all that's going to be left is for you to tinker with these effects or filters that are going to happen. Again, as we scan, this little thumbnail is showing us the information that's being collected. So we're seeing actual scan of the image, and it's a little darker because this is what it's capturing, not any of the filters applied. Now that it's completed the scan, it's going to do calibrating for IR scan. So it's trying to figure out the infrared information, and then it has to do the infrared scan. So this takes some time as well. Now when it does the IR scan, again, it's showing you a preview of what it's getting. And the infrared information is coming from the scanner that helps it to create a mask to identify where dust and scratches are. But there's not actually photo information in there. So this will work great for 35mm slides and film, but it doesn't really work for reflective, meaning like if you're going to scan a photo or print that, or some picture from a magazine or a print or something, you don't really want to use this. You'll want to use the SRDX instead of ISRD, so keep that in mind. Now it says calibrating for multiple exposure scan. This is an expensive one, and so it takes a little time. Again, think of this like an HDR. You take an image at different exposures and then combine them. That's what it's doing, and that's part of the 48-bit image that it will obtain, and you'll see that what's happening here, and then it'll combine those. So once all this completes, then it has to process everything. So it's applying these filters and changes as they currently are, and you'll see this little rainbow thing spinning around as it's applying those. And it's applying it at this 100% because, as you know, if you want to do sharpening, you want to look at your image at 100%. And we can use this little navigator window to look around the image and see how things are going to work. And then when I let go, I actually see the results. And this isn't to the exact fidelity, but it's pretty close. So you see it didn't get quite all of that. And we can come in and create a mask and do some more manual corrections. But for this example, I'm not going to do that. I don't want to spend any more time on that. And so once we've made any changes, like let's say we want to just go ahead and amp up the sharpening a little bit here. Oops. The image is sharper now. It introduced a little noise. So if we wanted to do the gain dialog to kind of remove some of that noise, we could certainly do that. It doesn't require a rescan because we have that high quality image now. And it's showing us the exact previews available. We can back off at different zoom levels. But if we come back in again, we have to do this same scan all over again. It's kind of a frustrating limitation of the product. So now we have the 46% view scanned in here, and it's the exact preview disabled. In order to do that, we have to go back in again. So generally, once I'm in, I don't mess with that. But I'll do it right now and then fast forward. So to get back where I was, I have to go back to this high quality again. And sadly, that requires it to do all the scans all over again. So that's the kind of mistake you make once, but so be it. So once you have the final image, again, you can kind of slide it around here. You can make adjustments as we previously discussed. We're waiting for this little spinny thing to do its job. And I'm free to come in and make my corrections again, landscape, see what it's like. And it's going to reapply all the filters, so it takes a few seconds, And then if I wanted to adjust my sharpening some more, of course I could do that. Now once I'm done, and I choose my file name, location, and so on, and say scan, because I've done the high quality image, it doesn't need to rescan. It just needs to apply all the filters, and it's going to apply it at a little bit greater fidelity than even you see here. So it takes a little time, but much shorter than the scan. So you essentially paid for the long scan time by doing the high quality image. You can also just wing it and apply your settings to what you think you need to do. It's not going to be useful for a sharpening, but for example, if you just said, okay, I'm going to do auto ISRD and whatever I get is what I get, which is what I do a lot of times, and then just do the scan, you can skip this phase of being at the high quality version. So now that we're done that one, we're ready to move on to the others. So let's go back. And one common mistake that's really easy to make here is that it's so painful to do that one. You just want to go ahead and do a batch and do them all at once. And there's this cool feature up here. It says copy settings to all frames. So I could come in here and actually, before I do that, let's just show you that settings right now for this are 300, and it's set for all using these particular features and so on. And sharpening is at the default and everything. And if I select this slide and say copy settings to all frames, what that does is it takes what was right for this and applies it to all the others. But if you'll notice in this particular case, these images, especially once you start getting down here, are not at all like this image. So it doesn't really make sense to do that. Like the selection I made for sharpening, that was specific for this image. Why would I want to apply that sharpening to these other images? That doesn't make sense for them. The auto color correction might be applicable for these three because they're all from the same scene, but it definitely doesn't make sense for these. These are very different scans, and so it's convenient to use that feature so that they all have the same buttons checked and features and so on. But you don't want to just call it a day and then batch scan there. Batch scan is for when you really have kind of a lot of the same thing. Maybe it's the same scene with a person moving around and running or something like that. You're in burst mode and everything's pretty similar, so that it makes sense to do that. But in this particular case, it doesn't make sense to do that. So generally what you'll want to do is for each slide, scan them individually. And so if I come over here and I do that zoom in, it's going to get me a preview again. And this preview is now, it's not one of the high resolutions HQs, but it's a higher resolution preview than what I had before. And it's going to calibrate for the ME's multiple exposure scan and so on. And once that's done, you'll notice this isn't a high quality, so I have to hit HQ if I want to get that. But just at a fundamental level, if I came in here and did this auto CCR again, you're going to notice it shifted because this scene's very different from that other scene. So I had to apply that to get the right results for this image, this scene. The values that were used for that other scene were entirely different. So it would have been a mistake to just apply all and then do the batch scan. So definitely want to make you aware of that issue. Now I could come in here and make adjustments. In order to really see what the sharpening is doing, I probably want to actually do that HQ scan. So I could also just say, you know what, let's just put it at the default settings or even turn it off because the default settings are pretty safe. That's generally actually what I do. And then for this one, whatever it does, I'm happy with it. I'll deal with the rest in Photoshop. So if I do it that way, then it's okay to come in here and just say scan. Actually, I wish I would have adjusted that right there and up here, but okay, I missed it, but that's all right. This is a demo. So doing a multiple exposure and doing ISRD, they add time because it requires additional scans, but these give you the best possible results, widest dynamic range, and ultimately, if you're going to take the time to do all this, it gives you the best results, so it's worth it. Now when I look at these two images, I didn't spend as much time doing the sharpening, so of course this image is a lot softer, and it means I'll have to do that in Photoshop. This one I spent a little bit more time editing it in the HQ mode, so I got better results. And you can see the final results actually did a lot better job getting rid of the noise up top than the little preview did. Same here, the noise is been eliminated. So from that standpoint, I saved myself some time just getting results that are good enough. And sharpening is one of those you can do anywhere. So I'm not a big fan of doing the HQ unless there's really something I want to tweak before I actually do the final scan. Thank you very much for joining me for this 35mm slide scanning demo, and please join me for more on this series and review. Thank you. Bye.